Hello, 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 hello. It's good to see you. Say hello.
Welcome to the Huskies Hockey Podcast. Weldie and Andrew here for another rendition here of what we'll assume will be an extra salty podcast. I don't know what your I was going to say cholesterol, but the cholesterol is not salt. What high blood pressure, right?
There we go.
Is that it? If you take lisinopril like I do, it's to help with your high blood pressure. Be careful with this episode because I think Andrew and I are going to bring the salt when it comes to recapping this weekend.
Oh, I'm always very pleasant when we're talking about North Dakota 5-point weekends. What high blood pressure?
Right, exactly. So before we get to that, I just want to congratulate Andrew on completion of something that I could never accomplish in my lifetime. Finished a marathon earlier today, and then just, no big deal. I'll just get to recording.
That's right. It's just another
dedication.
It's just another day. Yep. It's one foot or after the other.
Whole hum 26.2 miles. And I mean, I would go into like hibernation for a week if I had to move 26.2 miles in a day.
I used to think that, but it's really not rocket science. It's just running. I had a good showing this year, relatively speaking. Good improvement from last year, which is my first marathon. Did the half in 22. I did the full last year. And then this was the second full, and shaved off some 47 minutes.
Oh,
I'm really not sure how. That sounds like a humble brag, but
yeah, a little bit.
Because I'm really not sure what exactly I did differently. My legs they held up much better than they did last year, but I don't know what my secret was to making my legs hold up. Like, I trained a little bit more. In terms of I made sure to get a 38-mile week and a 40-mile week in. This had been 3 and 2 weeks ago. I had a pizza on Friday rather than pasta. Could have been it. The course was slightly different, but for the most part, it was 75% the same. Better course this time, but it wasn't like more downhill or anything. It was about the same in that regard.
Was it better scenery? Did it take you to the nice parts of town? Did it?
I really don't know. With my training the last couple of weeks, I would do one long run every week. So I did 20 last week. And when I was timing myself there, I'm like, well, if I keep this time up, I should be able to crack 5 hours. And I more than did that this year. Like I said, went from 5:27 to 4:40, which again, not a stellar time, relatively speaking, to the whole field here.
I mean,
but in the 20 pounds overweight category, a competitive time.
There you go. There's that special category of the 20 pounds or over.
Like I said before, it's not necessarily the performance of the race. It's more the training that you are required to put in. That is why I do the marathons.
Sure.
But, and again, this is Tucson Marathon is a Boston qualifier marathon. It all depends on your age group, and there's not like one magic number that you need to hit, but whatever that number is, I'm well off of that. And I was trying to think like maybe that would be my next goal, but I think I would have to lose that 20 pounds for starters.
Sure.
And then learn to get
so the pizza beforehand
much faster.
Just you'd have to replace that with some kind of a caprese salad.
I think the pizzas. No, you want to carb up. I mean, it's lots of bread, and this pasta is a big one. That's kind of like the Michael Scott secret was eating the fettuccine Alfredo directly before the race. But so I do think the pizza was part of it, but But I don't know. I surprised myself, and from an athletic standpoint, I can't say that too often, really ever. And if we're Huskies fans, we don't say that often when we're talking about those teams as well. But
very, very much so. Well, congratulations,
well,
and I would like to see you go for that Boston Marathon qualifier.
Now that seems unattainable, but like I said, running a marathon 3 years ago seemed unattainable. Running that first half marathon seemed tough. So yeah, making goals. It's always good to have goals.
I walked 3 miles on a treadmill this morning on a 3% incline. And I got a little bit of a blister on my foot. So that's where I'm at. But
that was maybe another thing. I will say, so last year, the big thing is the feet for me. It's the ticker is really good. Like I could go 100 miles if it's just based on endurance. The thing that crimps me is joint pain, particularly hips, knees, and then especially feet. The feet in particular. Bad plantar fasciitis that developed last year. But one thing, if you've got blister issues, toe socks. I think it's a game changer. So it's like they look like a mitten, but you're wearing them on your feet.
Those existed.
I didn't know that they existed
footy
either.
Pajamas, yes, but toe socks.
In about halfway through my training session here, I took my socks off, the non-toe socks, pre-toe sock, and noticed some bleeding going on. And I'm like, I got to do something about this. So doing some internet research, which is always a good idea.
Oh, yeah.
It suggested 100%. Some toe socks, and I snapped some up, and no bleeding and no blisters. So 3 cheers for the toe socks.
I will ask Santa if he can put some toe socks into my stocking. So a little
toe socks, a sock into a sock.
Yeah, it's like a Christmas gift turducken, kind of just all mashed in.
I think we've officially bottomed out. We're talking about socks.
I think
7 minutes into the podcast.
Except the foot fetish people are probably really happy right now. Let's run the recap. Here we go.
Huskies and Hawks rekindle their rivalry with a 2-game series in Grand Forks. Friday's opener gets off to an inauspicious start as the teams feel each other out in a relatively uneventful, scoreless first period. To the second period, where the Huskies have thrived this year. Unfortunately, that good second period does not carry over, as St. Cloud is held to just 3 shots on goal, and North Dakota scores the first goal of the game, with Carter Wilkie notching his 3rd goal of the season just 5 seconds after a power play expired. Huskies would get chances but fail to capitalize on 3 full power play opportunities. UND gets an insurance goal in the 3rd period when defenseman Jake Livanovich scores his 2nd goal of the year. Some late-game fisticuffs develop when Gavin Thorson takes a contact to the head penalty against Hawks goalie TJ Septenfelter. Brad Berry and Brett Larson exchange some not-so-pleasant words. Gavin Enright plays well for the Huskies in net, but the previously struggling Septenfelter outduels him to pick up his first shutout as a member of North Dakota, and the Hawks win the opener 2-0. Saturdays have been the better night for the Huskies all season. Would the trend continue? Grant Ishan finally solved Septenfelter at 11:42 of the first period, going in on a shorthanded breakaway and popping in a pretty goal. St. Cloud would carry the 1-0 lead to the second period. Jaden Perron sneaks a backhand past Enright at 7:42 of the second to tie the game at 1. Special teams emerges for both teams late in the second as the teams exchange power play goals. First, it's Austin Bernovic scoring his team-leading 9th goal of the season after a UND too-many-men penalty. Abram Weeb ties it exactly 2 minutes later for UND, capitalizing on a Carl Falk tripping penalty, all knotted at 2 in the 3rd period. Doesn't take long for Barrett Hall to break the tie, scoring just 1:38 into the period, converting on a nice 2-on-1 with Bernovic. But the Huskies can't hold their 3rd 1-goal lead of the game when star freshman Sasha Boisvert finishes a Caleb McDonald pass to tie the game at 3. More late-game shenanigans as Grant Ishan takes a penalty, and then it's not a penalty after the referees review the call and see the UND cross-check that they missed. First time for everything. It would go into overtime, and early on it appears the Huskies may vanquish their 4th period blues, but a Hall and Yetnin 2-on-1 and an Adam Ingram breakaway are saved by Septenfelter. At 2:03, Dylan James out-hustles Josh Zinger in the corner and sets up Jake Schmaltz, who fires it past Enright to give UND the overtime win and deliver a crushing loss to the Huskies.
Well, that sucked. Just looking over the weekend and watching it, looking over it, going back to it, it's just, I don't know what it is about that godforsaken place up in Grand Forks that we just end up laying the biggest egg. And I get that, it can be a hostile environment or anything along those lines. It felt like a non-conference game in October when these two teams played. I don't think there was hardly any physicality. There wasn't really any animosity. Even when Thorson ran over Septenfelter, I didn't think there was that much of a dust up. I just
coaches
felt like
thought so.
Oh, the coaches. Yeah. I mean, they definitely got into it after that, but I mean, the players and a really uninspiring weekend for the Huskies. And the whole thing, as I was watching these games go, it's like the swoon has already started. We have moved up the swoon now to mid-December, and I can't believe I go back and forth on this team so much, where I was, 65 to like 70% that they were going to make the NCAA tournament. And now I'm just completely on the other side of it. Is like, we can't keep playing like this and expect to make any type of headway in the second half of the season.
I'll say, as far as the swoon goes, I mean, 4 out of 5 losses, 3 of those 4 in overtime. Pairwise ties, according to some folks. The one saving grace there is that we probably can't have a true full-blown swoon because of the Christmas break here. Like, it's probably a good thing that you don't play for a couple of weeks, because I had the makings of a prolonged swoon. Like, the February funk is, a 4 to 5 week thing. And this was a mini version of that. And because you really can't extend this any further, maybe there's a small bit of good fortune in that. I don't know. This was not a good weekend. The Saturday game, I mean, both games were very frustrating. And we'll definitely be breaking down each of these. The Saturday game in particular was the first one in a while where I've really gotten heated at my TV, yelling a lot. And part of it, I will push back about the animosity part of it. Yes, there wasn't like full out like punches thrown, but it felt like there was a lot of after whistle stuff. The 2 incidents, which we'll talk about, involving the goaltender in each night. Fascinating. The second one, the Ashan thing. We'll put a pin in that.
Get into that.
But that seemed to jack up a little bit of the animosity that was in the building. I will agree, as far as the atmosphere goes. I mean, it's hard to tell from TV at times rather than being in the building, but especially the Friday game, a lot of the corners seemed maybe half full. It was like the least kind of atmosphere type of Ralph that I've ever seen.
Yeah, maybe. It felt dead, and it felt like as a road team, that's what you want to take advantage of it, and just to have a bagel there on Friday with not even a ton of chances, it's infuriating.
Against a goalie who's been pretty bad to this point. To get him off the mat is incredibly frustrating. And from Enright's perspective, played pretty well himself on Friday. Good goaltender battle, but to get shut out, certainly not the best way to start. And then Saturday too, I think there was 3 separate leads in that game. Yeah, the whole overtime session, which was, in one sense, maybe the best overtime performance that I've seen from the Huskies.
We did get the puck and we did get chances. So that's...
I was even thinking that perhaps Larson got our message from last show, because the 3 forward pairings, he started with Mietin and Hall, Then he goes to Ingram and blanking on what? No, because it was Gross and Bernovic were the third pairing. Can't remember who Ingram was with, but it was one of the top 6. Like I was expecting, I saw at the end of regulation, Sahlquist's line took the last. They had the last shift in regulation. Then in the little 2-minute intermission before overtime started, he was kind of hanging on the boards, but on the side of being on the rink. And I'm like, if he starts overtime after ending regulation, what are we doing here? But to his credit, I guess, he was putting out top 6 forwards. The one defensive pairing or person that he put out there, Zinger, he made sure to end that game.
Oh my gosh. Zinger, you alluded to it. Maybe
I hate being right
to it
so often
last episode, but in any good conscience, I don't see how you can put him on the ice. And of course he will be throughout the rest of the season, but I would much rather have Bufflin and Clark.
I've never prayed for Warren Clark harder than I did last night. Let's rewind. Let's go to Friday and then we'll go to Saturday, because I feel like we have more to say on Saturday, so we can build up to the good part. But yeah, as you said, that first, especially the first 10 minutes, there was a bunch of stoppages. The game had no flow, and you feel like as a road team that's not bad. You feel like that's an opportunity for you to get on the board first, assert your will to an extent. I mentioned in the recap session, slow, boring-ish first period, but the second period, you're thinking St. Cloud, this has been their period. What was it? 8 goals in the second period alone in the Omaha series across the 2 games. 7, I think. But 3 shots is all they were able to generate. Penalty trouble as well. I thought Wiley's interference call was ill-timed. Really, that seemed to be the big turning point. Not that St. Cloud was even in much control up to that point, but I was more surprised at how unimpressive North Dakota was. But that penalty seemed to shift the momentum, because while North Dakota didn't score on that power play, they scored right after it, and I don't think Wiley had a chance to get back into the play. It was a de facto power play goal, even though it doesn't go in the books as one.
It was a power play asterisk,
right?
Kind of what I like to call those.
From that point on, you're kind of skating uphill, and once they get the second goal, it's as if that was seemingly an unsurmountable deficit. Yeah, you had plays like Ashan's breakaway. You had the play in the first period where the puck kind of trickles by Septenfelter behind him. Was going to go in, but that McDonald for North Dakota was able to save it before it crossed the goal line. Probably a big play there. Obviously, that goes in. St. Cloud gets that first goal. Unfolds much differently, I would assume. But aside from a couple of grade A's like that, power play was back to its unproductive self. Just sort of an uninspiring game. I didn't love the Thorson play on Septenfelter, but at the very least, it seemed to wake up the team a little bit. I thought perhaps we could channel that and make that, carry over to the Saturday game. We'll get to the Ashan one on Saturday, but my initial reaction was a bit of dramatics from Septenfelter. So his reaction, Thorson's coming laterally. He's coming east-west. And he's making a hockey play. I think it was a penalty. He did contact the head.
It was a little bit late. He clearly had it covered.
I will say, he didn't throw an elbow or anything. Yeah. I think the head contact was incidental. I don't think he intended to hit his head. Again, I think it's a penalty. I think it's a 2-minute call. I think they got that part of it right. But again, he's coming east-west. Septenfelter's reaction is to launch himself back like a cannonball hit him in the chest. And then he rips his helmet off and skates about 20 feet to the right. And then does like the waving his hair up and looks really cool. Kind of looks like Matt Cullen a little bit.
Septenfelter. I can see that.
That didn't strike me as like a natural reaction to being egregiously
Need you to break
hit.
down the Zapruder film.
It was sort of like a back and to the left, where that's really not the path of Thorson.
Yeah.
But it got everybody hot and bothered, Brad Berry and Brett Larson included. Then when I saw him do the same shtick on Saturday, when he's, again, pulls the helmet off, I don't understand that move. And acts all indignant when Ashan is cross-checked into him. And he, again, does the falling back as if he's been shot. Again, we're talking about the most heavily padded, overprotected, mollycoddled position in professional or amateur sports, hockey goaltenders. But yet, you even make any slight contact with these guys and they will react. It wasn't even like I made the joke to my buddy like this, he should get an Oscar. It wasn't even that good of acting. This was like a Lifetime movie sort of acting job.
Ooh.
So I am not.
I think you're going to tick off a lot of our life, especially during Christmas time. A lot of our Lifetime Christmas movie watching, listening contingent might take a little bit of offense to that. Or
even if you love those, movies, you're not. These aren't Meryl Streep type performances that they're putting in necessarily. All I'm saying is I got some feelings about TJ Septenfelter, and they're not all that laudatory, is what I'll say, based on those reactions. But yeah, I mean, we got some angry coaches. It almost kind of reminded me of that one with the with Evison and Bonus from Winnipeg, when those two kind of had their lovers spat a few years back, because they were kind of chirping across the glass at each other and some F-bombs. And so that kind of spiced things up a little bit, but that might have been, and then he had some chippiness after that, the last couple of minutes of the game. Huskies get a 5-second power play to end the game. Again, that goes against that power play record.
Right.
I put it on the recap. 3 full power plays and then 1 5-second power play. So officially 0 for 4, but really kind of 0 for 3 when it really counted. But yeah, a frustrating loss. You don't like to get shut out ever, and especially against a rival, and especially against a goaltender who has put up a ho-hum year to that point. And second time, so third shutout of the year, second time I would say that it comes at the hands of a kind of average at best goalie. Septenfelter here, and then if you remember, Logan Stein from Michigan shut him out, and his save percentage is under 90% at this point. So those don't look to be fantastic results at this point in the year. But coming into the Saturday game, we've seen St. Cloud play much better on Saturdays throughout the bulk of the season. No matter how bad North Dakota is or average, we can maybe have a discussion like how you think North Dakota looks based on this weekend. But my thought coming into the weekend is he is split. That's just fine. The Huskies certainly played better on Saturday. At least you got on the board a few times. But I don't know. You start off with Saturday. I've been talking for a while. So Saturday, what are your thoughts going into that game?
I'll put a bow on Friday.
Sure.
And just say, I don't think there were a ton of positives, except I did think Gavin Enright played fairly well.
Yes.
I thought this was one of Barrett Hall's worst games I've ever seen him play. I thought he had a lot of turnovers and a lot of bad passes, and just in general, a lot of disconnected passes from the Huskies. And a couple of weeks ago, and maybe it was just last week, actually, you were talking about how you were excited to see this Huskies team on a small ice.
Yes.
That you think that they're more well suited for that. If that's the case, they did not play it at all really this weekend, but especially not on Friday. I felt like they were really timid. I didn't think they were nearly aggressive enough. They didn't push any of the pace. I felt like they hardly laid a body on anyone. It was a lot of stick checks and a lot of poking. And I don't know if it's because of the size of, some of our players being a little bit smaller, but it was kind of interesting because I like Larson as a coach. Yes, I think he's got some flaws, but there were some instances on Friday that I was just kind of looking back thinking, I wonder what Adulski would be like coaching this team, because I felt like Adulski leans into the physicality of hockey more than Larson does. And I'm not calling for a coaching change or anything like that, but at the same time, I was like, I would like this team to be a little more disruptive and a little bit more physical. I feel like we're a little bit too passive. And I felt that incredibly showed on Friday. And that, combined with our disconnected passes and seemingly no one being on the same page, was just a recipe for disaster. And sure enough, we got blanked.
Yeah, I agree. I think especially with Larson kind of being billed when he came to St. Cloud as a defensive coach, being a defenseman as a player, and I think that was his assignment with Duluth. But that was definitely his MO, being more of a. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you're a physical coach or you endorse playing a physical style, but you'd think with the kind of size that this team has, especially on the back end, guys like Falk and Clark only played on Friday, but Clark's got some size. Ralph. You think that you've got the personnel. You've got like Litke is he's not a size guy. Zinger, he's not much of anything at this point, in my book. Those guys aren't really guys that you look at from a physical standpoint, but the others that I mentioned, you think would play well with that. And yeah, I would agree that North Dakota was doing more of the aggression. Like a Coin in particular, he felt like he had a rough and tumble weekend. Seems like whenever he turned around, he's getting hit by a North Dakota player. And yeah, so I would agree, if you're especially on the road, if you want to dictate the pace a little bit, you can do that from a physical standpoint. That might not show up on the scoreboard in the short term, but throughout the course of a game like that, I think it's a good recipe to win a road game. So yeah, definitely agree with that as one of the flaws. And I agree also with Enright. I said on Twitter I would want him to start on Saturday, which he did. Again, I'm not making any long-term. It's Enright or bust at this point. I'm sure we're going to see some James Gray in the second half. But for the 3 games, he's played pretty well.
Yeah.
Better than I would have expected him.
I don't know. Like Saturday's game, there was the sharp angle goal. I think
that was a bad goal. That was his worst goal.
And that was like, okay, yeah, that's kind of what we expect from, a goalie that kind of came in as an afterthought. And that one was kind of a tough one to give up.
Definitely. And it did cross my mind. We were talking about the James Gray performance last week, thinking that it was the first goal there too, which I thought was a bad one that he gave up. Do you think if Posch plays on Saturday, they win that game?
Yes.
I think so too.
Yep.
It's not just the one goal, the one cheapie that he gave up, but that it's 1-0 at that point. And you did have control of the play to an extent that you didn't have really at any point in the Friday game. Like the big key for St. Cloud was getting up 2 goals in that game. Mm-hmm. And so it's not like, you just take that goal off, then they win 3-2. This could have turned the game into a 3-0 game or 3-1 game. Like the butterfly effect. It could have been a lot different than how it actually turned out. But if you're going to say 3 games and there's really one cheapie that Enright's given up in those 3 games, again, this is a guy who put up an .870 save percentage last year. I said last week, if this goalie tandem, however they split the action, if they put up a average level goaltender, 905 save, let's say, I can't really expect more than that. Again, based on the track record of Enright, the track record being largely unknown with Cocaine Bear, and the fact that his nickname is Cocaine Bear, at least on this podcast, I don't think that we can expect anything approaching what Posch was putting up. So if that's what I expected, I think Enright did that, maybe even exceeded that to an extent this weekend.
Sure.
I haven't looked at what his actual save percentage is, but I bet it's higher than 905. So, yeah, I didn't like that first goal that he gave up. He's at 918 right now. Like, again, I don't expect that to be he's going to be put in a 918 save percentage throughout the course of the season, but you do that and you score 3 goals, you feel like that's going to be enough for this team to win. But where do we start? I mean, it wasn't just that one goal, the one bad one that Enright gave up. I mean, there was a lot of other culprits in that game. What else bugged you about that game? Because it seemed like it was a series of being annoyed, this game, how it played out.
It was annoyance kind of just stacking one on top of the other.
Yes.
First and foremost, I think this was just a terrible performance by Zinger, and any hope from him being any type of productive defenseman, I think, is just thrown out the window after this game, because he's been subpar to adequate throughout this season. And then this last game, I thought he was, even before the overtime play where he had the advantage, ended up getting the puck turned over, and then,
That's all
causing, the game-winning goal there right at the end. Even before that, it was just, he was just completely off of his game. I don't think anything that he was doing out there was positive, and that's just for someone who was kind of came in expected to be like an Anhorn replacement. It's been incredibly disappointing, and the transfer portal hasn't done too well, I don't think, for Brett Larson.
Yeah, that's, if you want to have,
I said transfer portal hasn't done too well than Anhorn and like earlier. But.
No, I had that. I had some of these exact thoughts, and I want to unpack some of these. If you want to put one culprit on the game, I think Zinger, with the way that the game winner unfolded, I think it's easy to pin it on him. Again, I think that's probably a little too easy of a playing of a blame game to put it all on Zinger. But yeah, he has crossed the threshold into unplayable at defense, in my opinion. I want to rewind a little bit. So I thought it was interesting seeing the line chart for Saturday. Some interesting things there. Playing 6th defense, you're playing a 13th forward, and Ingram is listed as the 13th forward. Yep. He certainly, this year, they've always played their extra player at defense, played 7 defense in every one of these games. I can't remember a game last year.
I can't remember. Yeah.
That they had a 13th forward and only playing 6 defense. And for Ingram to be the guy, even I listened to KBSC, the play-by-play on Friday, and then I watched the North Dakota feed on Saturday. A little curious. And I think they do a decent job. And they were speculating, I don't know if you listened to their feed or not, but they were speculating if this is like a message being sent to Ingram. I mean, we've talked a lot about Ingram over the first half of the season being very underwhelming, just the 2 points and just coming last weekend. I don't think he played great on Friday. However, it was certainly, I don't think, his worst game of the season. If you wanted to send a message,
he played fairly well on Saturday.
On Friday, are we talking? Because I'm going into Saturday when he is moved out of the top line.
When he moved out, but I thought, like, as the game progressed, he got more.
He was
time.
It was they gave Rogers like 2 shifts, and then they basically put Ingram back together with Gross and Aucoin. So the 6 defense part is weird to me. And if you are signaling something to Ingram, I mean, you benched him once already this year. In one of the BC games he didn't play. I'm not sure if this is the right time to send a message, and especially based on Friday's game. I don't think we need to alter lines bad on Friday. And the fact that line, you finally got them back together last weekend, and they played really well. The best that probably any line has played this year on a weekend was last weekend versus Omaha with Gross, Ingram, and Aucoin. And then you busted up for the first part on Saturday with Rogers, who I'm for seeing more Rogers, but I'm seeing so that line is tinkered with. You keep the Miettinen, Hall, and Bernovic line, which has been a good line of recently, but as you mentioned, did not play well on Friday, especially with Hall. And you've tinkered with that fourth line. The only line other than the Miettinen, Hall, and Bernovic line that has been intact for the last 4 games is the Salquist, Thorson, and Ports line, which has 1 point in these 4 games. This is coming on the heels of the Gardner injury, who missed this weekend as well. Gardner was playing where Thorson has been playing on that line. Gardner had been playing there for a few weekends prior to that, but he's out. So the solution is to plug Thorson there. And the result has been 1 point combined. And that was a Salquist tip from the point. Ports has been pointless. Thorson's been pointless. And then you've got Rogers, who's just like last weekend, a kind of a spark to the lineup. It just screams, get him on that line. If you're going to tinker with any line on this team, why is the Salquist line untouchable? That baffles me. And I know I crap on Salquist a lot. Whatever. Again, you put up the production. All 3 of those players combined have 8 points this year. It's just a line that is not working. And even they flashed the graphic. Miettinen is your face-off wizard now. Miettinen's close to 60% in the face-off dot. So Salquist, it's not like he's far and away your best face-off specialist. So I'm just baffled as to why that line continues to get pass after pass after pass. Well, when you're apparently sending messages to your other lines, or even the Ashawn Rosborough line, which produced some offense this week. So the line shuffling, to me, you're playing shorthanded defensively, which ends up burning you to a large degree because you've got to expose Zinger. Zinger was getting walked like multiple times in the third period. I don't know what you were doing thinking of playing him in a 3-on-3 situation as your lone defenseman in overtime. Yeah. And it took it 15 seconds of him hitting the ice for that game to end. Because of, again, you get outskilled by an opponent. I can accept that. From his perspective, it almost seemed like he was loafing to that puck in the corner. It didn't seem like he was putting forth much of an effort. And so there was also, I want to mention too, because there was a couple of times in the game where I'm like, is Zinger being moved up to a forward position? Twice in the game, I thought that. Once there was a 3-on-2 where he was one of the 3 Huskies in an offensive rush. And I'm like, this is weird. Is he playing forward? And I had to wait until the rest of the Huskies entered the zone. And it was one point, it was Aucoin was playing a defense. And another time, Ryman was playing a defense. Just, again, covering for Zinger because he was part of the rush of the action. And so that was strange to me. You normally don't see 3-on-2s with a defenseman involved in the action. But that gave me the idea. It's like, it seems like he's more naturally suited for forward. He played forward up until juniors when he was converted to defense. And yes, he goes to Northern Michigan, has some success there. But even at parts of the season last year, Patulny had him playing up front as well. He's kind of been like a Ben Storm hybrid role for Northern Michigan at some points last year. From what I'm guessing is that Grant Patolini probably saw some of the same things we've been seeing about Zinger, about his defensive lapses. And I mean, I'm talking about like him sort of having a very slow first foot, just kind of getting burned easily. There was a handful on each game of sloppy turnovers, costly turnovers. It's just he's a liability to an extent where I don't think you can really play him at defense in any meaningful amount of ice time at this point.
And I think like his stick checks are incredibly weak and not effective, and that's what he's reaching for the puck too much, and it's just against any above average to average Division I player, they're going to be able to walk around that. To just skate around it, and it's just soft on pucks, which is kind of goes back to my Adelsky thought, was like, a little more grit, a little more sandpaper, I think is kind of what this defense needs. And Zinger's definitely not giving us that. And yeah, maybe his size has a little bit to do with it, but you can, I think, Jack Ashan gave us plenty of that, and he was a smaller size as well. I will say though, I'm okay with him being up in the rush, because I think what was missing a little bit more on, Friday's game that I saw more on Saturday's game that I liked was that our defense was getting more aggressive. I think they did hop up into the play more. And I did think that they were, being utilized a little bit more in the offensive zone. So, all of that I was really excited to see, and I was excited to see him come down the ice, and I was excited to see that opportunity. But it's, using that to kind of generate some offense and kind of create some confusion for North Dakota, all of that is ideal, in my opinion. But, everything else from the side of his puck, from the own zone, it was just painful to watch out there.
Yeah, I will say this. I'm not completely giving up on Zinger. I honestly think he might be a decent fit at forward. Like, he's got offensive skills. I believe we gave him a POW. I think it was one of the Augustana games. So he's shown flashes. He was billed. I mean, maybe it's incorrect for us to have billed him as some sort of Anhorn replacement. But he was billed as more of an offensive guy.
As far as like an offensive defenseman that can quarterback a power play.
Correct. Yeah, I'm not saying that was incorrect. Nope. Maybe just the comparison, we're putting the name Anhorn out there, it sets the expectations a little too high. But because it seems like offense is a area of the game that St. Cloud could use a jolt, maybe trying him out there for a few games wouldn't be the worst idea. Like I said, that Salquist line has got some openings. They're hiring for that line. And I think defense, while it's shown some leakage over the last couple of weeks, I mean, you've got some depth there. Like I mentioned, you went with 6 guys on Saturday, which meant that Clark and Bufflin sat on Saturday. And then Thiessen. You've got Thiessen. He played. We've only seen him in that exhibition game against the Gophers, and he really didn't look very good. But he's a guy that you're kind of just burning dead time with him, because he's too old where you're not like getting a benefit of a redshirt year from him. Mm-hmm. You're just sort of keeping him inactive. So if push comes to shove and you just need another body, he's there. I don't know if from a defensive standpoint, I don't know how much of a drop off it would be from Zinger to Thiessen at this point. So I'm just saying, I think you've got personnel that can fill in on the back end. I don't think you're losing anything with the potential substitutes defensively, and you might land on something. I think Zinger might be an answer to that Salquist line, and he's not going to be a top 6 guy, but he can be an option along with Rogers in that group that he might be able to produce. So that's more, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt that I think that he has some skill here, and I'd like to utilize that skill to optimize that. So
Yeah, and then you talked a little bit about the Ashan penalty. And so they call it a penalty on the ice, review it for a major, which you can clearly see that he was hit into Seppenfelter. Um, and it was just one of those Freudian slips. Now, the rule changes is that, pretty much they can call it any type of penalty or waive off the penalty now, which I think is a good rule change because you can clearly look to see Ashan wasn't the aggressor in this situation as much as Seppenfelter wanted to act like he was. However, looking at just the fact that the ref actually said the words, the attacking player was cross-checked. And I get that if they're reviewing one penalty, they probably can't go back and tack it on the penalty to the other side. But it's just one of those Freudian slip type things that it's just absolutely hilarious to see. And it's just like, of course, we're not going to get, these types of calls, and we're not going to get that benefit that was actually what happened. So it was just, I think, one of those like great moments in NCHC roughing history that we could put on maybe a billboard, or we can put on a sounder. We can have that in the future. But
yeah, I did not know that was the rule. I think we always go over rule changes in the summer podcast, but apparently I did not retain the knowledge that this is a thing now where you can take penalties off the board like completely. So I've never seen it where a player, Ashan in this case, is sitting in the box and then says, "No, never mind. You can come out of the box." And
I don't know how many that's happening around college hockey, but apparently in the past it's been enough of a problem where they wanted to review it to be like, just more flexibility when it comes to rule changes. I think that's what we automatically go to is like, oh, great, more subjectivity when it comes to rule changes.
Yeah, so. And I'm never a fan of giving the possibility of more reviews. In this case, I mean, it benefits St. Cloud at the same sense. If you took the time to look at the video and you saw that you missed a clear penalty, the cross-check in that case, I know that you can't just add a minor upon video review, so I get it, but just logically, it doesn't make much sense. And then the fact that Barry has to complain about that whole sequence to the refs, where it's like, dude, you got the benefit of not having your player take a penalty, which was very clear. And that hit caused your goaltender to flip out as if he was an assassination victim. So I didn't, that sequence was definitely another fire them up kind of moment for me.
As far as like theatrics go, Barry definitely had them as much as Seppenfelter did. Because he was quite animated at that time, and definitely had some words for Larson really after both games, which I always think is kind of funny anyway, because it's not like the coach, like there's no coaches that it's going to be out there. It's like, hey, I want you to run the goalie next play. And, another thing is, a phrase that I hate that fans really like to throw around is like, he's not that type of player, or he didn't mean to injure someone. It's like, I don't feel any player actually intends to injure someone. They just play hard, and sometimes that accidentally happens. So all of that, all that discourse that I saw online, it was like, oh, he intentionally ran to injure Seppenfelter, when clearly that wasn't the case on either night. That it was just kind of a hard fought play that, your goalie boy wanted to kind of act up. So it was a little bit interesting that Barry got so worked up over it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a first, like I said in the recap. I hadn't seen that before. I'm glad that at least it was sorted out to the extent that St. Cloud wasn't charged with would have been a very bad penalty call against them. But it's so that, and it fired up at least this viewer watching several states away. But like I said, it gave me some heated thoughts about it. It rekindled that North Dakota hatred, which I'm not going to say it's been dormant, but I don't know, the distance away from it, not being in the same building as North Dakota fans, has tamped it down a little bit.
Sure.
This
that I can understand.
Stoked it, definitely.
Yeah, sure enough. You asked about what I think about this, UND team.
Yeah.
Kind of way back when. And it's an adequate team. I think they've got really two good players. And a couple other above average players is kind of what it comes down to. Now, Cameron Berg didn't play. And I think that is a big loss for North Dakota. But, Sasha Bover I think he had a strong weekend, and Livanovich, I think, is one of the best defensemen in the NCHC. I think he's kind of, behind Zeev Bouillon. I think he's definitely up there. Perron, I think, is an above average player. I think, I didn't feel like this was kind of the normal North Dakota team that we've kind of seen in the past. I didn't think that they were aggressive either. I didn't think that they were very physical. So I was kind of surprised, seeing a North Dakota team this passive. But they found a way to win there on Saturday. And anytime St. Cloud was able to get a punch in on them, St. Cloud let them off the mat. They were able to kind of come back, and sure enough, we'll put out Zinger there on a 3-on-3, and then the game will be over very shortly.
Yeah, I mean, one of my buddies said that he thought this was the weakest Dakota team he's seen. I push back on that. I feel like that late teens, the first 2 years that Barry didn't make the tournament, 17-18 and 18-19, I feel like those teams, they still had some leftovers from their national title team in 16. They had guys like Kawaguchi that were coming in that would turn out to be good players. But I was going through some of those rosters and the stat sheets from those teams. So the 2018-2019 team probably was the worst of them. Kawaguchi was the leading scorer, but he just had 26 points that year as their top scorer on the team. Both of these years, Nick Jones,
who?
He had 30 points in 18-19, which was second on the team. And then in 19, he had 20 points in 26 games. So he was injured for much of that year. And he was also the second leading scorer on that team. Those are his only 2 years at North Dakota. I have no recollection at all of Nick Jones.
No.
So that's why I'm calling those 2 years the Nick Jones era. And he's got the anonymous name that 30 million men in this country probably have, which goes to my point that those, I think, were the worst teams that Dakota's had, at least in the last 30 years.
Yeah, I can see that.
Because at least and I also was thinking the DeRitter year from a few years back, and that was the year that they completely gutted the defense over the offseason. All of their defensemen from that year were gone the following year, but he still had guys like Jackson Blake on that team, which is more than the Nick Jones teams. I think he got, like you mentioned, with Boisvert, and I finally nailed it in the recap.
You did. I heard that. Yeah,
I had to practice a couple of times, but Livanovich, those kind of players. I think it. I'm not. Are you convinced again with these injuries, which are hurting the team? So it depends on how much Berg they get out of this year, for instance. But do you think at this point, still in the 20s in pairwise, even after this weekend for North Dakota, do you think this is a tournament team?
No, I don't think that they're a tournament team. I don't think that they're going to be able to. Like, I would say their ceiling, in
second place in the conference currently.
I mean, sure, right now. Once everything kind of evens out, I don't see them being much higher, especially with their non-conference results. I don't see them, getting much higher than the mid-teens. I think they're always going to be on the outside of the bubble looking in, and I don't think that they're going to win the NCHC.
I certainly wouldn't pick them to win the Penrose.
I mean the conference.
Or the frozen face-off for that matter.
God, that would suck. The last one, and North Dakota wins it. Ugh.
Have they won a frozen face-off?
No.
Yeah,
nope.
You like that. You like that fact.
Oh yeah. Oh hell yeah. Since it turned into the frozen face-off, actually, I don't think they've made a championship game.
I'm thinking did they play Duluth in one of 17, I'm gonna say, or maybe that was a semi.
I think that was the semi, because that was the year that oh man, Dan Jacobson is screaming at his computer right now.
Also North Dakota fans who are very aware of Brad Berry's postseason track record.
He just ran into the goalie.
Oh yeah.
I think that was the third place game, because they won the third place game because St. Cloud beat them 3-2, in the semifinal.
I'm thinking it would have been the year before that, the year that St. Cloud didn't make it to the final face-off.
Okay.
Again, we have the internet here. I could look at it.
Oh, 16, yep, you're right. 17. Okay, they did. Yep. Okay, yeah, they did make a championship game against Minnesota Duluth. That was at the Target Center.
Yes, and you're remembering.
That was
right.
That crashed. That just ran into Cam Johnson.
That's correct.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm looking at this box score. Holy hell with the penalties.
12
penalties for Dakota, 15 for Duluth that game.
I remember that game. One of the most fun games that I've been to that I wasn't.
Well, it was a Todd Anderson refereed game. So
that tells you everything, right? Yeah.
God, the fact that the conference that we choose to follow decides to put that guy in charge of its championship game. Did you
quickly off topic, did you watch the Dump and Change podcast with Spencer Meyer?
Again, I binge these, so I've got 3 or 4 now in the well that I've got to catch up on.
Spencer Meyer one was hilarious, and I'm sure I like that 2 of my questions got answered too. So that was nice. But basically,
did you ask him what his favorite flavor of Coke was, or what was your softball question that you get one softball and one hardball?
Nope, they were both. I just throw heat in my questions.
He didn't to Adulski, which was gum. It was gum flavor. I think that's what.
That was. Just
but he is a big gum guy.
Curiosity.
So, yeah.
And my fastball or my hardball question for him was, "Hey, so North Dakota, how'd you hear about that? What happened there?" They did not.
They didn't touch it.
Sometimes
they don't. They back away from that brushback pitch. They don't like that heat.
If you can't handle the heat, don't ask for questions. No, but Spencer Meyer, I asked about because I was at the last game with him and Cronulla in Fargo against the Gophers, and I just took note of it that they were the last 2 off the ice, and they kind of exchanged some words afterwards. And I just asked him, "Hey, what was said? What was going through your mind at that time?" And he gave kind of a really cool, thoughtful answer when it comes to that. And then the other question I had was was on Twitter, and I actually quoted about the question. I said, I'm not going to be the jerk that asks about the Gopher jersey poll, am I? Which I kind of is like, I probably that is more Perbix question, but he was still on the team. Like he was on, but he went on a whole tirade that is just
good.
A+ when it comes to that. Not only a bad call, but also like, what are we doing in these non-conference games with these officials? Like, why are you punishing your conference by not calling it, like, just pretty much like, you got to give us the benefit of the calls, because when we go out east, we don't get the benefit. So we're never getting the benefit.
I've said that my theory is that they're trying to overcompensate for that being decades long narrative of WCHA's. They're going to screw the East, and Hockey East is going to screw the West. And this is their NCHC being high-minded and moral. Same. We saw Nepo ref out there. So not like the morals are consistent, but inconsistency has always been a trademark of the NCHC officials.
That's the only thing that makes it consistent, is the inconsistency.
That's correct.
So anyway, if you got a chance, I highly recommend that episode. That was a pretty fun episode to listen to for him. So back to this weekend though. Who's your pal?
I had to think about it for a little bit. No, it's not like we had a Tyson Gross 4-goal weekend to ponder. I'm going to go with Sean. I liked the shorthanded goal on Saturday.
Going to the same move as a redemption was, I think, pretty ballsy. I kind of liked it.
It's a good move. He probably should have scored on both of them.
He should have scored the first time on it. But that was like a weird slip of the eye, like the skate. It was so.
Yeah, I like his energy. The fact that he took the penalty that was not to be. The fact that he's willing and able to go into those areas and risk being cross-checked in the back. I like his style of play. Of the bottom six, he's the guy that I'd be most willing to give a promotion. Not like there's, I guess Ingram would be the guy that you'd replace out of there, but not like that. I think I like the top six in general. The bottom six is lacking. Ashan, I wouldn't put in the lacking category because it feels like he's got a special aspect to his game that elevates him from that status. Like he's not a guy where we see like Ryman and some guys get sit a game to make room for a Rogers. Ashan, I don't think is going to get scratched this year. Like he's elevated himself. He's solidified his role in the team that I think he's scratch proof at this point. How about you? Who's your pal?
I am actually going to be pretty paint by numbers and go Bernovic. A goal and assist, and on Saturday. So it's a little bit paint by numbers and a little bit predictable. If you would have gone someone else, I probably would have gone with Ashan, as well. Just mostly for the redemption. I do agree though that I think he needs a mainstay on that bottom six, but you hit it on the head earlier. I think that something needs to change with Salquist, Ports, and Thorson line. I don't think that is doing anything. We've gone over a lot about Salquist, who even had a solid leader. I kind of, ate my words last year, and kind of even said that he definitely performed above expectations. He's kind of gone back to that, kind of afterthought role. I don't know what Ports' role is on this team.
I have no idea.
Like in general, I don't know what he does. I don't know what he brings to this team. It is a complete question mark to me.
I think, and this gets back to the physicality, because I think his player type is kind of this like bruiser, but he doesn't play like that really. I don't. It's a baffling one to me. I've never really seen the upside to him. Like he'll put in one game a year, and we probably already got it this year.
We already got it with his 2-goal game. So
and last year it was middle part of the season. He was gone. He was scratched, not injury related. He was just out of the lineup for performance reasons. And it was really only injury based, I believe, towards the end of the year where he kind of got back into the lineup. And that's probably when he had his one game last year. He scored in the tournament against Denver. But yeah, he's baffling. I could definitely use more Rodgers if you're going to tinker with any line. Like I said, tinker with that line.
Yeah.
And mentioned this on Twitter. They pulled the goalie with down 2-0 on Friday. Who's the first line out there? The Sulquist line. These are the kind of things with Larson. It's like, show me a little bit more of a sense of urgency. Talk about like last week in the luxury that you have up 5-1 in the third period. You can play all four lines. You don't have to double shift guys. You're down 2 late in the third period. That's when you double shift guys. And I you don't really need to see the bottom 6, 5 minutes to go in a game when you're down by 2. So yeah, those kind of in-game adjustments frustrate me, and saw a little bit of that this weekend. So yeah, there's tinkering to be had with that bottom 6, but at least with Ashawn, he's a bright spot among that group, and so I'm happy to give him the pie. I wish it would have come with a W this weekend, but we can't have good things as St. Cloud fans.
Go Huskies, woo. He actually picked Enright, but preface this was saying Enright, I guess. So it kind of sums up everything. Still a sub 3 goals against average on the weekend. Made some incredible high real type saves. And did his part. Special shout out to Bernovic with another amazing goal. Seems like the only person who wants to score goals on this team.
And you said Ashawn might have been your number 2. Enright might have been my number 2 as well. So I'm glad that
I can see that
he got some love there.
Yep, exactly. So with this weekend, St. Cloud State, after today's games as well, drops to 11 in the pairwise. So we are further down on the bubble. Only one point on the weekend, overtime loss and a loss in regulation. This time last year, I believe we were at 14. So we're sitting in a little bit better shape when it comes into the break, but the good news is the people above us. We got Western Michigan above us, Denver above us. So, we've got a lot of ground, to some of these top teams. Arizona State is sitting at 18. So they're not that far back. Colorado College at 19. So it's, we can still, obviously we're not dead in the water. I know we're being really negative this time, but it is still important to know that we're still sitting on the right side here. We just have to kind of keep plugging. I will say also, I love to see Long Island sitting at 21 and North Dakota at 22. So Long Island is still above North Dakota. Long Island winning the comparison to North Dakota just kind of makes me laugh.
That is a good bit.
I don't think it's going to last very long, considering that they are tied 1-1 in head-to-head comparisons. The RPI is 0.0001 in favor of Long Island, so I don't think it's going to last through the next game. But
who was their common opponent?
Providence.
Okay, and North Dakota only played the one game against Providence. That's looking like that's like North Dakota's best result this year.
Yeah,
because I believe Providence is up to 6.
Yep, they're up to 6
with
right
their
now.
sweep of CC last weekend. Conference standings, we got 8 games played for everybody. So the 1/3 point of the conference schedule, Western top of the leaderboard, 19 points. North Dakota 2 points behind. You got Arizona State, then St. Cloud at 4. CC 1 point behind them. Denver at 11 points. Kind of an under the radar scuffle. Sweep by them, and then CC comes from 3 goals down on Friday to beat them in the gold pan.
I made the mistake of turning that game off, thinking a 3-0 lead was going to be safe. But credit to CC for coming back.
See, yeah, I mean, I can't see Denver being a bottom half of the team, bottom half of the league team. Got to see them moving up, and Arizona State obviously would seem to be the team of the top 4 that's going to slide out of that home ice position. But I would expect Western Michigan to be there. Again, I'm not really sold on North Dakota. It's like, I'm not sure. Beginning of the year, I had them second, and that's where they sit right now. But with their injury status and this weekend aside, Septenfelter has not been very good. So I'm not sure. I'm not confident to say that they're going to remain even in home ice position. We'll see how that develops. You kind of made
coming out. They've got Arizona State, Western Michigan at St. Cloud, and then Colorado College at home at Denver. So I mean that's going to be
then a trip
at
Western Michigan to later in that run too. They've got a tough schedule in the second half.
Mm-hmm.
But they're playing Western and Denver, which are the 2 highest teams in pairwise for the NCHC. They're playing each of those teams 4 times apiece this year. So a tough schedule break for North Dakota. I'm weeping for them, but so yeah, they've got their work cut out for them. You had made reference to this earlier about you've dipped below 65%. You stayed steady after the Posch injury. That had no effect on your rating, but it sounds like that slipped.
That had no effect on my rating because of where we stood in the pairwise at that time. Because you were still at 7?
Yeah, 7, and now you're at 11. That's the name of a convenience store chain, 7-Eleven. So you mentioned you talked about North Dakota earlier, and you got them out. They're out of the tournament.
I got them out. Yep.
Make a bold statement about St. Cloud. In or out?
In.
Really?
I think this was a bump in the road on a weekend against, probably a team you should have beaten or at least should have gotten a result on. And in a place that historically the Huskies have not had, what was it again? We haven't won there since 2019.
Well, it can be a trick question. So they have not beat North Dakota at the Ralph since January of 2019. You can't say that that's the last time that they've won at the Ralph, because if you remember, 2021 NCHC playoffs were all at the Ralph. So they beat CC and Duluth at the Ralph. Okay. So they beat.
Who did we lose to?
They lost to North Dakota in the title.
Exactly.
I'm counting that in the 10. But so you can say that you've beaten CC and Duluth since the last time you beat North Dakota there.
Sure.
And that was that CC game that was the Rennick, like 180-foot pop fly that got past the goalie, if you remember that one.
Yeah. That
was an ugly win.
That was a tough win to watch.
Yeah, because CC was awful that year. But so it's been a while since you've won in North Dakota, just in general, because that was 2021. You got to go back a couple more years since you beat UND there.
I think this break comes at a good time for them. And I think that, Gardner, I guess I don't even know anything about his condition or what issues going on with him, but him, kind of getting healthy, maybe he can get a little bit of a burst on that third line, have it with a Salquist, Gardner, Thorson type line. I think that can create some havoc. Because, Thorson being kind of a pest and Gardner being, 6'10" or 6'7" is the more realistic one. But, and it's, I think that still I'm optimistic about our goalies, and I'm optimistic that we're going to be kind of on the right side when it's all said and done. But I feel like you're going to have these types of weekends. I'm not going to overreact, but maybe down to 60% now. But I'm still thinking that we're going to be on the right side of it when it comes to season's end.
Yeah,
I think this team is going to improve as the season goes on.
I would hope. It just from the last couple of years, second halves have always been worse than first halves. That's one thing that's playing against them. It's weird that, yes, bumping the road, I think, is a good way to describe this weekend. It's frustrating because you really can't feed off this weekend because of the break now. Like, there's no, on both sides of that, there's no extended swoon, as you maybe threw out there earlier in the show. But there's also not like a, hey, we can pick ourselves up next weekend and we can get off the mat.
I'm not really consistent, am I?
In a good way. You're unpredictable, and can't pigeonhole you. That's right.
Yep, exactly.
So yeah, you've kind of just got to pause on the season now for a couple of weeks, and then you just play the one game against St. Thomas, and then it's another 10, 12 days until you play, and you really kick off the second half in earnest. And that St. Thomas game, which is looming large, like you've got to win that game. Like, St. Thomas is 49th in pairwise when I checked. You can't drop that game if you've got NCAA aspirations. But then once that second half and that St. Thomas game, you might be without Bernovic and Ralph because they're going to be at the World Juniors. So might be a little bit shorthanded, but still can't lose that game. And but then you got the second half, and it's going to be a gauntlet, especially in that February range. It's the toughest part of your schedule. Coincides with the annual time where St. Cloud seems to struggle the most. So my trajectory here, when we did our Pick the Field show, I think it was the first week. It was coming off the BC series. So it would have been the first Sunday or Monday of November. And I said they were out at that point, not knowing what the pairwise said. Then we haven't done Pick the Field shows, but we've just kind of had this talking point over the last couple of weeks. And when we saw the pairwise was, somewhat legitimate to look at, I said, well, it's 7th in pairwise at this point in the year. I put it at 75%. Posch News, I put it at a couple of ticks, I said, over 50%. Because I do think the Posch injury was a big blow. I felt like it was a more impactful thing than you did.
I agree that it was a big blow. I feel like Posch eventually would have regressed down.
He would have. So. And I said last show, if the offense can step up and counterbalance the loss, this might make the team better in the long run. That's like the best possible gloss you could put over the Posch injury. But if I ticked over 50% at that point, and then we've got this weekend, I guess I'm going to go back to my the November Pick the Field show where I'm going to say at that point I said no, and that was with Posch putting in a really good year. Without Posch and we've had spots. We had the Omaha weekend, but we just haven't had a consistent offense. That's if that's going to be more important now that Posch is out, I'm not especially confident that this team can consistently put in 3 or 4 goals a game here.
I'd even go as far to say I don't think we've had a consistent weekend.
The Omaha weekend was probably the most consistent offensively. You had 8 goals that weekend. You had 7 goals against Bemidji. I guess that would be the other candidate for that. But go back to last show, we hated that Friday game from the Huskies' perspective. So even there, we found some things to nitpick about. It's just, I think too, like we're talking a lot about Posch. We're talking a lot about the offense. We've talked a lot about at least certain members of the defensive core. It might be sliding under the radar. The defensive core as a whole, I think, is kind of underwhelmed this year. And so it's not always the same culprit. Yes, we've got some thoughts about Zinger, but I've stated my frustrations at times with Cooper Wiley. Litke had a really bad game last Friday against Omaha. Colin Ralph, who I still would say is my favorite of the defensive core, it's not like he's 100% without errors, and he makes some bad plays, and he's a freshman. He's 18. My level of confidence about him developing into a stud remain, but you're still going to go through some growing pains with a player that young. Again, that's another unit that needs to step up in the absence of Posch. So this weekend, especially on Saturday, didn't look too great. So we've got a lot of areas of improvement here to be had.
There were a couple of times too when Reiners, I was like, "Ooh, buddy, what are you doing?" And especially late in the third in a tie game too. There was one specific play where he literally just had the puck and had time and just passed it right to a North Dakota player who came in on a scoring chance. And it was just frustrating.
The Dahl stall was aggressive on Saturday.
It was so bad.
And another thing that was enraging me, it was at least 3 or 4 times where they did the thing where I'm not going to take 2 more strides and get past the red line to dump it in. I've got to dump it in one step before the blue line or before the red line. Ryman did that at one point, I remember.
Ryman did it once, too.
And it's just lazy.
He called the timeout, too,
yeah,
after that.
Yeah.
Which Ryman just got on the ice. So it was kind of this weird, like you just made the change and it didn't end up biting us.
You got to take an icing just to service. Right.
You give a timeout to the opposing team, like, to get your guys out there, but at the same time you're giving your other team a chance to get up and draw play and everything like that, giving them the advantage. And it's just like, buddy,
face-offs too. I wanted to mention, so Friday they were about even. Saturday North Dakota
dominated,
was very good in the face-off circle, but even both games, I'm sure the stat is out there. I just need it to be on CHN. If Woden needs to get off chip and give me the stat of offensive zone faceoffs. Faceoffs in either team's offensive zone. Because I honestly think with they said that Salkos was like 10 for 16 in the faceoff circle on Friday. I swear all of his wins are in center ice or out in the neutral zone, which are like the ones you don't even notice. The ones that are in the offensive zone on either end of the rink, those are the key faceoffs. And it seemed like St. Cloud was losing all of those, like 90% of those all weekend. And it was, again, adding to the frustrations that were compounding throughout the weekend.
I feel like if we're going to add something to a faceoff stat, I would like it to be like important draws. Like
that's kind of what I'm getting at. Yeah.
Yeah. Like either if it was like within the last 5 minutes of a period or
start of a power play, like, something along those lines. Yeah. It seems like all the St. Cloud power plays started with losing a draw.
Yeah.
Which is
it getting ice
killed
down.
You. Right.
And then also I'm just going to say this. I don't know how well it's going to translate on audio format. Like, watching a game or like me doing a video about it, we'll dissect it more. But if it's a delayed offsides, I know I'm going to be in the minority on this. But if it's a delayed offsides and the other team has the puck, I would say more often than not, you should just stay offsides and make a play, whistle it dead, because then it's at least maybe this weekend was like a 45% chance that you're going to get the puck back versus 100% chance that the opposing team has the puck. So I just think that there's something to be done there, but I think that's as hockey as a whole and not just specific to this team.
I remember when you tweeted that out. Well, the one where I think what prompted you to say that, because you do risk intentional offsides.
That's so rarely called.
I mean,
like you could.
I think in the
it's
one
a
that
risk.
the one that prompted your tweet, I think would have been one that they would have called an intentional offside.
I don't think it would have been. I don't think
there is that
I think it
risk.
has to be
That's all I'm
really-
saying. There is that risk.
Yeah. And even then, I would say that, or literally having 100% of the time that your opponent has the puck.
I think that's why they came up with the intentional offsides. Because if you're like, you're in a situation where like, wow, hey, 50-50 here. That's why they send it all the way down the rink. But
yeah,
it was just a frustrating, it wasn't like big things. There were some big things, but it was just a lot of little annoyances that, again, just kept piling on top of one another. And then we get the overtime, which was looking so great. We had the 2-on-1 right away. We had the breakaway. We had chances to the extent that we normally don't see with St. Cloud in 3-on-3. But it was one puck battle in the corner, and it comes down to that.
Yep, and that was it. So, I guess we talked a little bit about overall this weekend. Michigan State against Minnesota debuting their
spicy series. Yeah, and I didn't watch any of it, but it seemed like a pretty good series. Or Michigan State good comeback on Friday, or on Saturday, I should say.
On Saturday,
tie on Friday, and then a come from behind win for Michigan State on Saturday. Yeah, I saw what is with. Are we in the minority? Like gray jerseys are the hot thing in hockey, because I think it's horrendous. But
it was one of those things that's like, I get what you're doing, but I don't like it. I don't know. It didn't really appeal to me. I didn't care for it, but I could see why people would love it.
Are there people that love it? Have you is there chatter on Twitter that these are they're great?
If you click like the debut, tweet or post about it and look in the comments, there
are some positive.
Range. Oh yeah, there's some people who's like, love, I want to buy one right now. But I don't know.
Because I saw Omaha was wearing their grays again too this week.
Yeah, I don't like Omaha's gray, especially with the gray with the red on the logo too. Like
Mankato, the Mankato one. I didn't realize that the Mankato gray, they've got like a blue striping at one point, which that's not even one of their colors.
Yeah.
They're like purple and gold. That one's way too busy. The Mankato gray. You can say what you will about like the Omaha one. That's at least a simple design. You just got the gray background with the regular cow logo. The Mankato one, I think, is way too much, and that's where I would kind of put the Gopher gray as well. A little too overdone.
Now, St. Cloud had a gray jersey. We had it for Hockey Day, I believe, one year.
Was it fully gray, or was there like a checkerboard kind of thing going on? I feel like it was, and it was a lighter gray. Like
it was a lighter gray.
Like that Gopher one is pretty dark gray.
Yeah, that's a really dark gray. I don't really. Was that the Hockey Day that St. Cloud had when St. Cloud hosted Hockey Day back in 18, 19, somewhere in there? No, I think it was the 2020 season.
Okay, I remember it. I can't pinpoint the year of it, but I can tell you I probably wasn't a huge fan of it based on what I'm saying about my.
I didn't. I didn't care about it. It was a very much a.
I don't think gray is a good color on a hockey jersey, but again, I suppose it could be. I could be wrong. I'm frequently wrong. So
we played Minnesota Duluth on that. We won 2-0 on that game.
What do you have, like a database of jersey wearing occasions for St. Cloud? How can you find that?
Vintage hockey, vintage MN hockey.
There you go.
Or vintage Minnesota hockey.
I visited that site a few months ago.
Yeah. And apparently,
check out like those wild, like there was some 80s uniforms for St. Cloud I had no idea that they wore.
Yeah.
The one where it's got the SC on one side and then SU on the other. It's like split across the breast. It's really strange. They only wore it for 1 year. I think it was the year before Brooks took over. There are some weird designs in those days.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's and apparently, and I've never ordered from them, but apparently they do a really good job about ordering actual jerseys, and they do the custom printing on it or whatnot. So apparently they do a good job. I don't know anything more about it, but that's got like the eras of like all of the evolution of the jerseys. So
good.
I know it's not gonna really help any of our listeners here, but I'll go ahead and get that pulled up so you can get the reaction from.
Yeah, I remember them.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have said it was January of 2020, but yeah. So it's not fully gray, but they've got like the white.
They got the white.
Waves.
And it was a light gray, like you said, but it was just awkward.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm not a fan of the gray jerseys. So anything else kind of around college hockey that piqued your interest?
I mean, it was a pretty light schedule. Yeah. NCHC and kind of like the West was the most busy. We had some like I tweeted about like Boston College playing all these midweek games. So I've been able to catch some of their games. Monday, they played a Monday game recently and a Wednesday game. Played like 6 games that are not on Friday and Saturday this year, which is weird. And that's not even counting the Bean Pot, which they always play on Mondays. I don't know. Again, we saw like Merrimack do this a couple years ago where they just randomly played a bunch of. They were playing like Tuesday, Thursday. I remember they played like a 2 p.m. Friday game, which is like, I don't know what you're doing. At least with Boston College, they've got, it's a big school and they've got basketball, I think, in that arena as well. Like Merrimack, you're thinking, what the hell else are they playing at that arena? I didn't think that it would be like a facility conflict. But we see with the Eastern teams some schedule quirks. Boston University and UMass played this week too that I caught a little bit of. But yeah, as far as this weekend, not a ton on that end of the country. Augustana went up to Anchorage and didn't win. They won a overtime game, but didn't win a regulation game. I think that may have had a bit of an effect on St. Cloud's pairwise. They've dipped now down to 30, so like about at dead average in pairwise. Yep. Just
on the wrong side of the tuck cliff.
Wrong. Well, I don't know if that. I think the tuck cliff the exact halfway point, or was
it might have been. That might have been.
If that's the case, Bemidji is the dead nuts average right now at 32nd out of 64 teams. But Ohio State climbing back. They're right behind St. Cloud in pairwise. Michigan went 3 games without scoring a goal.
Yeah.
So they've slipped as well. I still think it's a wide open field. I mean, I don't
like, you got to think Hockey East is going to drop off, right?
Yeah, I saw that New Hampshire played Dartmouth in an in-state rivalry, and New Hampshire is again up to 14th. They're last place in Hockey East, and they're 14th in the pairwise. Mm-hmm. Now, there is a disparity in the number of games in Hockey East, so that's a little deceiving, but that's still pretty incredible this late in the season for a situation like that to be apparent. But yeah, you think in the second half here that when Hockey East is playing, all conference opponents basically from January on, other than the Beanpot really, that teams like New Hampshire, I think Lowell, who's up to 8, I'm still really not sold on them. Certainly 6 teams is going to be a tough ask for Hockey East to get 6 in. I mean, UConn's right there at 15th at a 500 record. We might be getting the Wisconsin rule sounder out for UConn. Yeah, they'd be technically out of the tournament right now because ECAC would also be an auto bid only league.
Wisconsin rule update.
Go backwards. Didn't want you to spoil it too early.
No, don't care. I will use any excuse to use that sounder.
I just saw there UConn at 7-7-1 and at 15th in pairwise. Large part of that, they've done really well against BC. They took them to overtime and then beat them. So they've got a big quality win bonus added to their RPI because of results like that. So, and this is how you get a Wisconsin rule sounder played. We made that when the Big Ten was like uber good 2 years ago, when you had, I think it was 6th place Notre Dame at one point was within the cut line in the pairwise gate. I think that was the impetus to make the Wisconsin rule sound effect. And that's so if a conference is doing so well, it's kind of rising tide lifts all boats, or however the phrase goes. And so teams like New Hampshire, namely, are being propped up by the success of the conference. So yeah, I would expect that to level out. Like even Providence at 6, I think is a bit of a fraud team. So yeah, we've got a pick the field coming up a couple of weeks. We'll do one in the beginning of January, and so
after St. Thomas, right?
Probably the show after that because we do it before the second half gets started. So maybe 3 weeks we'll do that one. So we can get some of these hot takes set in stone, see how wrong we are, and looking forward to it.
Yep. Let's get to questions. Eric Zamora with his first one. Where do I go pay you on Patreon to get you to tell that Grand Forks story? No chance in hell. There's not a dollar amount that's going to get me to tell the Grand Forks story on air. If you want to think less of me and you really want to know, maybe send me a DM. I'll tell you, but it's not one of my finer moments, I will say.
I've got one of those. I should say I've got one of those. It's a Denver story, but I ain't gonna divulge it on air either.
So I don't know. Maybe
I think you're a St. Cloud Husky fan like we are. We've all got a story like that.
We've got
just depends on what city it takes place
it's in. And I still know the garage code of some random guy in Wisconsin. It's 9553.
Now that story I want to hear.
Oh, that story is a pretty easy story. He just we just met some guy. This was the year where the Badgers played because
was this the Raby game winner?
No. This was where they had to play the game at Dane.
Oh yeah, this would have been Coliseum. When they clinched the McNaughton.
When they clinched the McNaughton that
2013.
The whole impetus of Grant Patolny drives the minivan.
Second Patolny reference to the show. It's good,
right? That's too many. But anyway, so they served beer at that one because that's off campus. And now, obviously, Wisconsin drinking, like that goes hand in hand. Madison, like
the Wisconsin sounder that we just played.
Exactly. So, but anyway, so they sold beer at that game. We ended up going to the game late because I got drunk the night beforehand because that's when we technically clinched, and we were late because we drove like from St. Cloud to just. So
you did not go to the Friday game.
No.
But you just went to the Saturday. You just wanted the gravy game after it was clinched.
Exactly. So anyway, we walk in at the end of the first period. But what was great is like where the bar was, like where you could buy alcohol was like instead of like in and going around to the ice surface, you in and then you go down to like to the bar area. So that's just where we went. Like we just popped in and then down to the bar. So we got in before the rush and we both double fisted and just started having drinks there. And then it was with, and then that's when I think Brooks Bursch and like, anyway, I met some of like those parents were there and we were all drinking with them. And we started chatting with this Wisconsin guy and he was just giving directions to where he lives. And he was like, oh yeah, just come on over. It's garage code is 9553. It's all and he went into this whole thing about why his code is 993. It says it's really quick, it's all diagonal, and the key is you got to have 3 and your garage code combination, because 4 people can figure it out. 3 it's harder to figure out because when the numbers wear off, the combinations exponentially go up. And he's slurring all this and drinking how tough his code to crack is.
The one that he just handed you. God, that's good.
He said, come out at 9553. That's the garage code. Beer and cheese is in the fridge. And it's like
you got a Wisconsinite from Central Casting
phrase.
Right.
Yeah. The more of a Wisconsin phrase than here's my garage codes. Beer and cheese are in the garage fridge. Help yourself. It's like,
I got some jerky in the back. That's all he was. And like, it's right next to the Brett Favre jersey. I think that's all he was missing.
Right. And then I had like a lot of old fashions is how that night ended. And then
as one does in Wisconsin.
Exactly. So I told that story in lieu of telling the Grand Forks story.
All right. Fair.
He followed up with, is it at all optimistic to feel with the team having a dud weekend and it didn't appear to be on the goaltending? Like we lose these games 6-2, 7-5. I would be way more concerned. 3 goals on the weekend just isn't getting it done. I get where he's coming from. Where you lose Posch and goaltending wasn't the issue. So, but the fact that we haven't been able to hit the back of the net quite a bit at all this year, and we took a big hit to, the main way we prevent goals. That's where it's a little bit concerning.
Yeah. I mean, would you agree Posch prior to the injury was the best player for the Huskies?
Correct.
At least this season. It's
debatable. It's between him or Brnovic.
Yeah, it's debatable.
But I would probably still say Posch. But I mean, the fact that Posch was definitely a Richter forefront.
Yeah, even if you're saying 1, 2, even 3, like any team, you say, okay, for more than half the season, you're going to miss your best player or one of your top 2 players. There's not a ton of teams that are going to be like, okay, well, we'll shake it off and we'll adjust just fine. I mean, every team deals with injuries. I did catch like the Gophers were down, I think, to 9 forwards. 9 forwards they played with on one of those games due to injury. And then Matthew Wood randomly was cut from Team Canada. They took him out of that weekend because he was on the preliminary roster for Canada for World Juniors, the only NCAA player for Team Canada, and they ended up cutting him. And so the Gophers are just out Matthew Wood for this last weekend. Again, I'm shedding many tears for the Gophers, but
that's got to be really tough for them.
But I mean, so injuries happen. We just played North Dakota. We talked about Cameron Berg. They had Jammer came back on Saturday, but he was unavailable on Friday. Every team goes through injuries. You're not unique in the regard that you've got to overcome some injuries. This one was just, it's a position where you don't have a ton of depth, and it's not something that you necessarily have contingency plans for. And so it's a big loss. I said it last week. You've got the opportunity that this can inspire the rest of the team to step up. We didn't quite see it this weekend, certainly not consistently. We saw a little bit of it on Saturday, but it wasn't enough even then. We certainly didn't see it on Friday. Can you do it at least to a consistent level? You got to go at least 500 in the second half.
Yeah,
that might be like the bare minimum. And that's assuming you beat St. Thomas in a couple of weeks. But then you go 8-8 in the conference run after that. I mean, you're probably in that 11 to 14 range. You're probably sweating it out on pairwise weekend. So can this team go above 500 or not? I'm going to say no, but I'm going to hope that I'm wrong. I'll put it that way.
Let's hop right into Aaron's question then. Floor and ceiling with Posch being out long term.
Well,
like, where would you say the top of where St. Cloud's going to end up versus where they can bottom out at?
Okay. Well, you were at 7th in an early season, yes. All those caveats. Early season pairwise, you're at 7th with Posch. Considering the teams that were ahead of you at 7, teams like Boston College, who were you swept by, and so forth, I'd probably put 7. Let's just say a 2 seed in the NCAAs. That was what you were doing with Posch. So I would say, like, you weren't going to, I don't think you were going to move into 1 seed territory. Let's say 2 seed is your max, because that was your max with Posch. Mm-hmm. Now the floor, there were 64 spots at the pairwise.
Okay, come on.
Well, I'll put it this way, like, without Posch, you've got, like, how the goaltending itself, just that unit, how that evolves. There could be a couple of different possibilities there. Maybe the leader in the clubhouse, just from the 4-game sample that we have, is that Enright takes the job by the horns. And this might be the best case scenario, where one goalie, and let's call it Enright, because he's got the 3 games so far under his belt, he plays 90% of the starts from here on until Posch, if Posch comes back, or when Posch comes back. Enright takes 90% of those starts, and he puts in, like I said, in an average or maybe a slightly above average performance. 905, 910 save percentage. The flip side of that would be something where Enright loses his edge a little bit. He cools off in the second half, and we revert back to a strict platoon between him and Gray, and maybe it turns out where one of these guys turns into a Dominic Massey, where we're really not looking forward to his starts. Ugh. Maybe we're looking in where it's a who is, like, we're in a goalie platoon, meaning no one really is our goalie. And we're just waiting on bated breath until Posch comes back. And it gets to a point where Posch maybe comes back a week too early, before schedule, rushed back, risking further injury because the goaltending is a hot mess that needs to be attended to. Now, even in that scenario, I joked about the 64 spots at pairwise. I don't think we're going to get to the point where we're even threatening with like cratering. Yeah, you can lose the remainder of the schedule. I guess that would be the very worst scenario. I don't think that's realistic. But the worst case scenario is by the time Posch is healthy again, that you have no chance other than winning the conference tournament to get into the tournament. I would say that is the worst case scenario. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think this team is going to be into the frozen face-off weekend let's just say the first round of the NCHC playoffs. You still have a chance for an at-large. I'm not going to say that you're going to be in at-large territory, but
the fate will mostly be in their hands.
You're going to be within the top 20 of pairwise, I think, between now and the playoffs. What about you?
No, I agree. I mean, yeah, I would say second seed is probably the ceiling. And then I would say floor, if everything goes absolutely pear-shaped, if we play like this and then February happens like it has happened, I could see us being in the 20s and us needing a run. So I think our ceiling, my thoughts on the ceiling might be a little bit, or on the floor might be a little bit lower, but that's if everything goes absolutely haywire, which is possible. I don't think it's incredibly likely. But I don't see us like being down in the 30s in the pairwise at the end of the season from where we're at.
I think that's tough to do. Just looking at the schedule too, like the next 7 games, I think are winnable games. St. Thomas at home, pair at Duluth, home, two games at home against Arizona State, and then 2 at Omaha. 4 of those games are on the road. And Arizona State probably, certainly with standings and pairwise, they're the best of those 4 teams if you're going to count St. Thomas. But it's not going to be easy. But
a lot of that's getting propped up by that Denver sweep.
It is. But in those 7 games, I don't think it's unreasonable to say you can go 5-2 in those games.
Yeah.
So that maybe that's another gauge of this team that we can put on. Like, we know the February funk has been a regular routine, but this year in particular, it's the toughest stretch of the schedule. Maybe we should say, let's see how they do in these 7 games.
Yeah.
Because we're expecting this February to be like probably a 500 at best run of games there. But if you can go something like 5-2, or even better than that, prior to that, then you might have set yourself up where you can withstand a February funk like they have in a couple of the years past. Like, you did one of those in 22 and you did one of those in 23, and you still made the tournament in those years. So season might come down to how well you can give yourself a cushion before the schedule toughens up.
Next question. Derek, looks like Bradbury refused to take Larson's hand after Saturday's game, after what occurred on the weekend. Any thoughts on the dust up? Yeah, I don't understand, like, coaches not shaking each other's hands in the handshake line. It's like, like, again, it's not like the coach like literally said, "Hey, go out and crash the goalie, just run into him." And it like, what are you gonna say? Control your boys, and I'm not gonna shake your hand. I fart in your general direction. Like, it's all like, I don't know. It just all seemed kind of ridiculous to me. All of that. There's been a couple of those kind of situations where it's just like, you shake your hand or just walk off the ice and don't even do the handshake line in general.
With the Thorson play, first of all, it's a hockey play. I don't think it was a overtly dirty play. I saw someone on Twitter bring up the Genoa hit from Aaron Marvin.
Jesus, we're going back.
That was a dirty hit.
That was a bad play. That was a
this
bad hit.
Is not even in the same zip code as that.
Not at all.
In my opinion.
No.
This was a hockey play that he was a little too aggressive, and he deserved a 2-minute penalty. I think it played out how it should have played out with the discipline that he got for that. And don't tell me that
was it a fractured neck for Genoa? Like, it
put him out for the rest of the year, I believe.
For the rest of the year, it was a bad hit.
It like derailed his career to some extent. Like, he wasn't really the same after that. But don't tell me that a North Dakota player makes that same play on Enright. We're getting the Bradbury praise of the hard-nosed grittiness. There's a lot of gritty quotient this weekend with some of those plays, I think.
I wonder what their crud's going to be after this weekend.
Yeah, it increased on the margins, I think, with that. Yeah, and with the handshake line, I guess I missed that. Sometimes they'll do like the coaches will just come out and shake hands right by the benches, and then they'll do the player line. I always found that funny because like Botsko would do this with opponents' coaches. They would shake hands right away. Then each coach would walk into their line of their team, and then they would shake hands with all the players. And then once they got to the end with the coach, they just do like a wave high. Like, why don't you just wait till the end and then shake hands there? I always found it strange. So maybe they did shake hands. I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't, be based on the bickering that was going on back and forth on Friday night.
Theatrics.
The best one you got to look up. It's probably still on YouTube. It was Mike Eves. It was
Mike Eves,
Wisconsin and Lake State. But Eves was on the receiving end of it. It was, what was the guy's? I think his name was Jim Roque, Roque. He was an old Lake State coach, and I think Wisconsin killed him that weekend. And
it was like
they
9-1.
It was something like that, because I think even on the YouTube video they have the final score. It was whatever, 8-1, 9-1, whatever it was. And I think it was Eves goes out to shake his hand, and Roque does the thing where he looks at him in his eye to eye, and then pulls his hand away. And then walks off the ice.
Roque, who we believe it is, like shakes the assistant's hand.
Yes.
And then gets to Eves.
And then Eves just looks at him with the look of death. Like, what the hell did you just do?
Like, couldn't comprehend what just happened.
The look on his face
funny.
is priceless. God. I wish that video is still up on YouTube. I'm going to look at it after we're done here.
I don't think it is, but I think I'll talk to Nate Wells, Gopher State on X. He loves that GIF.
Oh,
so
great.
I think he'll know where it is or where to find it. But like his reaction, because it was straight out of like some slapstick or like some kind of sitcom where he just kind of
should have the Curb Your Enthusiasm.
The Curb Your Enthusiasm. Oh yeah,
behind
100%. Oh god, that was.
If you find that, tweet it, because I'm curious if it is still out there. I'd like to see it again because it's a good, like I said, 8-second GIF or whatever.
Yeah. And then I remember obviously Motzko yelling at
Montgomery. Him and Montgomery got into
Montgomery after, and that was right after Cole Gutman's decommit and signing his NLI National Letter of Intent. And we
got NLI, we got NIL.
Yeah, NIL. So now I get all confused about that. And I remember that they were yelling at each other, but I think that was more of a hit down in the corner. But there was certainly some animosity in general when it comes to that. Which does bring me to the next question of Go Huskies Woo did ask who will be the next World Junior player poached from the portal that's going to end up going to Denver. Ooh. Which I think is a good question, as Denver got the Bemidji defenseman, who I can't believe I'm blanking on his name.
Polkamp.
Yeah, Polkamp, who was on that team. So watch out. Watch your players on who's going to transfer to Denver from that team here next year.
Oh, and that one, because it's Bemidji, they normally don't get guys in the World Juniors. It seemed kind of obvious like he's like a poaching target for a more of a blue blood type, traditional power school to make a move like that. I don't know the roster enough.
By the way, allegedly, with all of these allegedly tampering.
God, I'm looking here and it's a lot of blue bloods. I mean, you've got St. Cloud's 2 players. You've got Zam Plant from Duluth. Or Max Plant.
Really?
I'm sorry, Max Plant.
Max Plant.
I don't. It would be really
you
ballsy.
and your brother just come on over to Denver.
It would be really ballsy if he was able to pluck a guy from the conference. Like that would be something. But
Carl Wood, Carl Wood, just to show that he can, he would. There's no doubt in my mind.
But most of this roster is BC, BU, Minnesota. Logan Hensler at Wisconsin. I'll go that. He's another defenseman. They just played him earlier this year, so he's a little bit familiar with him. He's not in the same conference. Oh, I like it. And I think Wisconsin's team we've seen has been subject to getting guys leaving in the portal.
And doing well, apparently.
And doing well in the portal. Much better than their previous landing spots. So I'll go with Logan Hensler is your 2025, 2026 power play specialist for the Pioneers.
Love it. Allegedly. Any idea about non-conference games next year? I assume BC and Augustana. So
I know he announced BC there was a return trip involved.
Yeah.
I'm just assuming Augustana is a return trip. I haven't heard anything official about that. If that is a return trip, that might be on my short list to go to those games. I've been to BC before. I would say that, but I've already been there. I've kind of scratched that one off. That would be a good series, though. I mean, obviously BC is going to be really good again next year.
Yeah.
But so I don't know anything else. Obviously, we're done with that agreement. I would assume it's going to be a lot of St. Thomas and Bemidji, maybe Mankato again. Well, what about the Gophers? Because I know we had a 2-year lull or break from them in the regular season. We played the exhibition this year. That they might be on the schedule again. I can't remember what their agreement was.
We've got a return. We got a return exhibition trip, but we
that's
don't
right.
have them.
And that'll be the next year
on the schedule. I don't even think the next year we're gonna.
So we just have these exhibition games so far. That's disappointing. So I don't know. I'd love to have some new team of some sort. I'm not really asking for like a Lindenwood or something. It seems like Lindenwood's making the rounds of the NCHC. Played Denver, played Omaha this weekend. I'm not really asking for that, but give me some fresh blood. Like, we got Michigan on the schedule for a couple of years. I don't know. Even Larson mentioned this when he was on Dump and Change, because he was an assistant for the first year, maybe the first 2 years of Steve Rollick's run at Ohio State. And he mentioned that they went back, I think in their junior coaching days. I was kind of wondering, like, get Ohio State on the schedule. It's not like I really want to see them, but we've never played them in a series. We only played them once ever, and that was in a tournament, like a preseason or a mid-season tournament.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like you figure with a buddy of yours, maybe you'd want to get him on the schedule. But be some team of that stature. Give me a Big Ten team that St. Cloud hasn't played yet or played in a while. That would kind of pique my interest. But I haven't asked Larson. I feel like I maybe lost my privilege to ask Larson based on my last couple of weeks, some criticism I've had with him. So I'm just going to wait like all the rest of us schmoes, and I'll just wait till the non-conference schedule gets released.
Yep, sounds good. Go Huskies will also add a little bit of a comment about saying that the recording recaps are great to keeping the show at a manageable length. And clearly where we're at right now hasn't helped. So again, thank you, Andrew, for the recording recaps. We're still going long.
2 hours, I think that qualifies as short now. So, because Josh says we can do longer.
Well, Dan Jacobson did ask, why the hell is the World Juniors tournament still stuck on the NHL Network? 100% agree. Go through this every year. Next week, we will have Jake Baskin on,
yes.
World Junior aficionado. And we will have him give his thoughts and predictions about this tournament. Looking forward to that. That's always a really good episode. So that's going to be fun. And then upperclassmen have underwhelmed for well over a year now. Do you think there is a way to fix that for this year? Yeah, when you're looking kind of at the spread for this Huskies team and just the points, I mean, we've really praised Deshaun for what he's brought. But I mean, even you look at it, he only has 6 points on the season. Saltquist has 4. I mean, and then nobody else is bringing it, and that's where it was so big to have Ingram and to see him down there. Deshaun or a coin can provide a jump, but he's not, I don't think, consistent enough. I'm still hoping out hope for Ingram that he's it's gonna click. I do think that there has been some good movement from him as of late, but it's still frustrating. There was one particular spot where I wanted him to shoot, and he decided to pass it over the weekend, and it ended up being broken.
I think I remember that. It was like a 2-on-1 opportunity.
Yeah.
And he does the thing too, where I don't know if he's got a magnet in the back of his breezers, but he likes to, like on the power play especially, he likes to drift towards the boards, like on a natural instinct. It's like, get away from the perimeter, get towards the action. I like an assertive Ingram more than a passive one.
Yep, I agree. And then just quickly, wanted to go over the women's side, just because a big tournament was announced for DC over Thanksgiving. It's going to be a pretty big matchup. November 20th and 29th next year in DC, a tournament that St. Cloud's going to be in.
Really?
Ohio State, Colgate, and Clarkson.
Wow.
So it's going to be a heck of a tournament in the women's side for Thanksgiving next year.
That's not going to be at the Capitals facility.
No,
maybe their practice facility. That's what they were doing with this Nashville.
I think so.
Tournament.
Yep. The MedStar Capitals Iceplex.
Okay, yeah, I'm sure that's their practice facility. Where did you hear that? That is news to me, and I love future non-conference schedule news. Yeah. So good,
especially if we can get like cross big matchups in women's hockey as well. That's massive. But
you got to. Oh, go ahead.
Nicole Haase from Us Show, who is kind of the premier women's hockey writer there at Us Show.
You got to think too with Ohio State there, they're not going to play Ohio State in the first round. So
I can't imagine they would do.
They would certainly have the WCHA teams play the ECAC teams in the first round. So you're either going to play Clarkson or Colgate.
The way the graphic is set up, it's Ohio State and Colgate on one side, and the other side is Clarkson and St. Cloud State. So
maybe it's Clarkson then, but
I would lean towards that.
Well, great. That's not that they don't say like that's the icebreaker, do they? Which would only count, or that only matter because that means it would be an exempt tournament, which means that they could fit in 6 other non-conference games. But that Nashville tournament is not the icebreaker. The Huskies played in the icebreaker last year. That was the Sacred Heart one that they ended up winning. But this will just be 2 of the 6 non-conference games, you'd think. So, but yeah, nice to see a quality opponent there. And did not expect to hear all the other 3 teams involved. It's definitely, that'll be the especially Thanksgiving weekend. You don't see a full slate of action. That'll probably be the marquee event in women's NCAA hockey that weekend. So yeah, great.
They had this event in 2023. And
the Gophers involved.
Yep, Gophers, St. Thomas, Harvard, and Cornell were involved.
So maybe they're trying to do like a WCHA ECAC thing.
It could be, but that was 2023, so they didn't have it then this year. But every other year. I don't know, but
I'm trying to think. Maybe they were doing like a traveling thing with that Nashville thing because that was St. Thomas. No, but it was Penn State and it was Clarkson and Merrimack. So yeah, no conference like 2-2 on that one. So probably not affiliated with this thing, but I like that idea. It's kind of like the Big Ten ACC matchup in college basketball.
College basketball, yeah.
Get together, and if you really want to go down a rabbit hole, 80s had WCHA and Hockey East on the men's side. Hockey East versus WCHA. They would play something like 6 or 8 games cross conference, but the wacky thing was those games counted in each conference standings.
Oh wow.
So Gopher games against UMass Lowell would count in the WCHA standings. They did that for like 3 or 4 years, which has always astounded me. I like the idea of having something coordinated like that, but having it count for conference standings seems crazy because you're not playing the same. It's a very unbalanced schedule. Yeah. Minnesota plays Lowell, BU, and UMass, but then Wisconsin plays 3 other random Hockey East teams. So if you ever want to go on a rabbit hole there, I don't know if it's vintage hockey on that one or you can Google it and find it, but always was fascinated by that.
Interesting. But I mean, if you're going to do that with 2 premier conferences, I mean, it's been women's hockey. You're doing it with the ECAC and the WCHA. That's definitely what you got to do. Well, and about does her this episode.
This was our quick one.
This is our quick one. Boom. Efficiency. Well, we knew we were going to have a lot to rant about. So that's very true.
Feel like we delivered.
And I learned about toe socks. So,
that's right.
And again, 9553 is the perfect garage code combination. In case you're wondering, all diagonal numbers still get worn out otherwise, because if there's 4 numbers worn out, you know what 4 to pick. If there's 3, which one's doubled? Where are they doubled? Too many. Learned a lot about the science of garage code combinations right there. That's for sure. So
that is correct.
I'm Weldie at More Clappers, MOAR, More Clappers on X, then also on Blue Sky, Weldie, Blue Sky, however you search. I don't even know.
Andrew, Mosey for Hobie on Twitter. That's Andrew at Andrew S or Andrew HHPSCSU. Right. Is it the other way around? I can't remember. Mosey for Hobie. It's the only handle on Twitter as far as I can tell. So just search for that and you can find me. Yeah.
Nobody else is clamoring for Mosey for Hobie.
I don't even think Tony Mosey is. So
Andrew SCSU HHP. This is excellent. So until next time, go Huskies. Woo!